The Black Hole, a novel by Alan Dean Foster. Chapter 4. Pizer leaned back in his chair. His muscles ached as if he had just finished a half-day's workout in the Palomino's compact gymnasium, though he hadn't moved from his position in all the time they had been playing dice with death. "Close," he murmured. "Too close. I want to be buried, but not yet." As if trying to cover his embarrassment at his outburst over Vincent, he spoke reassuringly to Holland. "Don't blame yourself, Dan. First we stumble into an impossible area of no gravity around the Cygnus, then we find out it's regular in outline and uncertain in effect. You can't blame yourself for not foreseeing the instability of an impossibility." "Put that way, it makes me feel a little better," the captain admitted. "And Dan?" "Yeah." "I apologize for the way I acted, for what I said, you know." "Skip it. That close to a collapsar, everything's stability is a little twisted. Mine too." He turned, spoke toward the comm pickup. "Kate, we're going to set down on the Cygnus. How's Vincent doing?" Her voice came back to him a moment later. "Still with us and looking for a place to dock. I told him we're going in. He requests permission to remain where he is for purposes of examination." "Permission granted. Tell him to keep his eyes open." It was an old joke, but he still grinned inwardly. Vincent had no eyelids to close with. "Charlie, you run the lights and scanners. I'll bring us alongside. If you spot anything that looks like an undamaged ship lock, or at worst a single entry port, say so. A ship the size of the Cygnus should have many. I don't want to waste time hunting through the records for details of her construction. I'm betting we'll find something a lot faster visually." "Yes, sir." A powerful beam illuminated space between the Palomino and the Cygnus as the smaller vessel nudged nearer the dark hulk. They cruised slowly along the surface. Pizer played the light over the craft as they searched both visually and with more complex but less decisive instruments. Quite without warning, they found themselves drifting over a city. 1,000 lights winked on below. Their brilliance smothered the single searching beam emanating from the Palomino. Ports and domes glowed radiantly. One moment the Cygnus had been a dead thing. Now she had shown herself to be alive with energy, if not with organic life. Something had finally reacted to their presence. The great ship had awakened. "What the devil's going on now?" Durant pressed his face to the lab port. He was straining to see in one or more of the glaring ports below, wishing for the use of a powerful portable scope. "Someone's alive down there." McRae's first reaction was more emotional than analytical. It was also infectious. Behind her and Durant, Booth was fumbling to set up his recorders. Then he began speaking into one in low, hurried tones. "Like the tree on Christmas morning." Pizer's attention shifted regularly from console to port and back again. "Funny. Just now I'd thought of her only as impressive, but she's pretty too." "Pretty or not," Holland said tightly, "we'd better set our warheads in firing position." "Hold on, Dan." Pizer sounded surprised at the captain's caution. "They've got to be friendly. I remember how she was armed. They readied her to do battle with imaginary alien hordes that never materialized. She carried 1,000 times more firepower than we do. If her internal lights are functioning, we have to assume that her weapon systems are too. She could have blasted us into plasma if she or anyone aboard had such an inclination, and could have done so on our first pass without revealing that she is operational. She hasn't done so." Holland hesitated before replying. "All right, we'll assume the intentions of whoever or whatever's running her now are friendly. Since you're quite right about our being ridiculously overmatched, I guess we might as well proceed optimistically. I just don't like going in naked." He checked the main view screen, punched for and received several different views of the Cygnus before settling on a particular one. "There's the command tower. Whoever turned on the lights is likely to be giving directions from up there." There's a subsidiary structure nearby that's likely to be a docking tower. The Palomino swung around, moving toward the large conical shape near the front of the great research vessel. As they passed close, a large viewport set in the Cygnus's upper section came into clear sight. "Your side, Dan," McRae was shouting at the pickup. Holland twisted to stare out the port nearby. It seemed as if he could make out shapes moving slowly within the translucent area. Then the Palomino changed attitude, and the momentary glimpse vanished. "You getting a better view back there, Kate?" "All I saw were suggestions of movement." McRae and Durant were directly repeating computer view tapes provided by the ship's scanners. Even after enhancement, they remained maddeningly inconclusive. That didn't slow McRae's enthusiasm. "There are people aboard, Dan." "Just shadows." The man standing next to her tried not to sound too critical. He knew she must still be imagining an unlikely reunion with her father, but he couldn't bear bludgeoning her with reason. Not now. Besides, hadn't they already survived a host of highly improbable events? First the discovery of the Cygnus herself, then the inexplicable zero-gravity field enveloping the ghost ship like some superphysical amniotic fluid. Who could predict what might reveal itself next? It was only slightly more incredible to expect that her father might be on board and alive after 20 years. Durant wouldn't be the one to put a damper on her hopes. Let Holland do that. It was his job. "They appear to be moving shapes," he added in a more hopeful tone. "But we can't resolve them. Neither can the computer." "They're people, Alex." Hope made her more beautiful than ever. "I know it. I feel it." "I hope you're right." He smiled back down at her, her inner radiance eclipsing that of the Cygnus. He was very much afraid her hopes were groundless. The Palomino slid nearer to the command tower, instrument antennae radiating from her upper sections like the spines of an alloyed sea urchin. Piser's attention was riveted on the less spectacular structure closer at hand. "It's a docking tower for sure," he gestured at it. "See? There are 2 extensible walkways. Wonder why they didn't roll out the red carpet earlier, since everything else on board seems functional. I don't see how they could have missed our orbiting them. For that matter, I think our calls should have made it through the interference. We were close enough." He looked puzzled. "Wonder what's up." "I don't know. Still wishing they were properly armed." Holland tried to study the docking tower they were closing on, and the imagined location of possible weapons ports. "And I don't like it. I don't like any of it. But they're calling the shots. We're outgunned and hurting, and we've got to repair our air system. Maybe they have the necessary replacement modules, and maybe they don't. We've no choice except to try to find out. Either that or pull off a miracle of microtechnology repair." Holland sighed. "Me, I'm tired of surprises, but I'm also fresh out of miracles." "Don't look at me, Dan. I'm just your average, well-meaning, hot-tempered co-pilot. I'd want to go aboard even if we didn't have to." "Don't get me wrong, Charlie. I'm curious to get inside that grand old mystery myself." He stared down at the enormous length of the Cygnus. "If there is anyone left alive on board, and if he feels like talking, he'll have a hell of a tale to tell." "That's no lie," Piser grinned. "I can hear Booth drooling over his recorder without using the intercom." They eased in tight, main engine silent, using attitude quads to maneuver the Palomino next to the waiting connector umbilical that protruded invitingly from the docking tower. Holland's frustration showed as they adjusted and readjusted their position, striving to line up the ship's main airlock with the umbilical. "They should be giving us some help," he grumbled. "Maybe someone wants to see what kind of pilot we've got on board." "Pilots," Holland corrected him. "Pay attention to your own end. Let's lock tight right the first time." Temporarily forgotten, the Palomino's advanced landing party of 1 was already active. Vincent released his grip on the ship's hull. Using his built-in maneuvering unit, he scudded the few meters remaining to the end of the connector arm, armature lasers ready. He upended and peered into the yawning maw of the umbilical. It looked deserted. Taking note of the artificial gravity functioning inside the tube, he adjusted accordingly and moved forward. Holland touched one control, then its mate. 4 lights blinked in sequence on the main console, bright yellow stars. He fingered 2 additional controls. Pizer did likewise on his console. Immediately, the 4 lights in front of Holland turned bright green. They stayed that way as a buzzer whooped once, became silent. He leaned back from the console. "We're here, come what may." Holland spoke toward the comm. "Alex, Kate, Harry, we're linked now. I know I can't expect any of you to lie abed and wait for reports. We'll go aboard together, but I want everyone armed." "Dan, do you really think—" Kate began. "Everyone, Kate. That's an order. A pistol doesn't weigh much. I'm not saying I expect we'll have to use them, but we'll be awfully embarrassed if the need arises and our weapons are all resting innocently back here on the ship. You too, Harry, if you think you can handle one." Booth sounded mildly perturbed. "I've had occasion to defend my neck, Captain. I'd rather point my recorders at anything we might meet, but I know which end of a pistol is for business." "Good. Assemble at the main lock." When they had gathered inside, Holland nodded to Pizer. The first officer performed the final check on the external readouts. "Gravity's 0.7 normal. That's about right for an umbilical link. It should be standard 1 within the ship itself. Atmospheric pressure is about 6.5 kilos per, where it belongs, and a little high in oxygen. Nothing wrong with their biosystem." He hefted his pistol firmly, glanced over at Holland. The captain nodded again. Pizer thumbed the last switch. The lock door slid aside silently. They heard a slight whooshing as air from within the Palomino mingled with the atmosphere of the Cygnus. A blocky, blinking shape was waiting to greet them. "Nice work, Vincent." Holland gave the familiar metal flank an affectionate pat. He did not bother to ask if the rest of the connector was safe. Vincent would have informed Kate if there had been any danger. "Out of the frying pan," the robot quipped, blithely ignoring the fact that he was a nearer relative of said pan than anything liable to be cooking in it. "Hopefully, not into the proverbial fire." McCrae moved alongside, eyed the machine critically. "You sure you're all right?" "I was banged around a bit when I lost my grip on the hull. Nothing a hammer and a little metal polish can't fix, thank you. It is fortunate that my heart depends on the steady flow of electrons and not on corpuscles and cells, or I might have had an attack when I was floating away from the ship. I am glad my body is not subject to such fragile organic fluctuations as thrombosis." "Stick it in your lubricatory orifice," Pizer advised with a smile. "One of these days you'll suffer a severe oil blockage, and then we'll see who has the laugh. I'll take flesh and blood over cold molybdenoi any day." "And you may have it," Vincent shot back, giving a passable version of a metallic shudder. "Easy now," said Holland, interrupting the banter. He pointed down the umbilical. "Company's coming." A bright oval of light had appeared at the far end of the connector link. They waited tensely. When the silence and inaction became unbearable, Holland finally yelled out, "Hey! This is Daniel Holland commanding the SS Palomino. We've had some trouble with our regulator system and we could use some help." His plea for assistance produced no more response from the opened end of the umbilical than had his self-identification. No one appeared to call back to them. "Looks like we'll have to go to them." McRae's grip on her pistol loosened. Funny sort of greeting. First they ignore us, then they turn on every light on the ship and extend an umbilical for us, and now they're ignoring us again. Holland nodded. "This changes things some. Charlie, you stay with the Palomino. We'll use Channel C for communication. Linked that way, we ought to be able to stay in touch." Pizer started to argue with him, visibly disappointed. "You're going to need—" "That's an order, Charlie. You or I have to stay with the ship." "And since you have rank," Pizer began tactlessly. "And since it's my place to go, and since that's what the regulations say, I'm going and you're staying." Pizer slumped, looked resigned. "Yes, sir. You're right, of course. Sorry for the back talk." "Talk back, Charlie. After 18 months together, you ought to know you can't offend me." The first officer's mood lightened somewhat. "We have each other to depend on," Holland added, indicating the others surrounding him. "But we all have to depend on you. Keep the ship's eyes and ears open, and see what you can find out. It's liable to be more than we will." "That's true." Pizer managed a smart salute. "Don't worry, Mr. Pizer." Vincent had pivoted to face him. "They also serve who only stand and wait." "Vincent, sometimes I think they switched your programming with that of a literary robot, or were you programmed especially to bug me?" "No, sir, to educate you." McRae laughed a little nervously. Beneath Vincent's easy humor and his very human sense of camaraderie was the unavoidable fact that he contained far more in the way of factual knowledge than any human brain. But this was the first time she had ever heard him even hint at his mental superiority. Her reaction, she knew, was more of a reflection of her own hidden foolish fears than of anything the robot had said. The fact was, she had more reason to fear any human than she did Vincent. The comment had no effect on Pizer. "When I volunteered for this mission," he said ruefully, "I never thought I'd end up playing straight man to a tin can." "What is a tin can, sir?" Vincent asked, revealing, deliberately, McRae wondered, a gap in his vast store of information. "Antique construction for storage," Pizer informed him. "Wasteful of energy and material. Remind me to refer to you to the correct history tape sometime." "All right." Holland, smiling to himself, had to force himself to sound half serious. "End of the lessons all around. Keep your pistols in mind if not in hand, and don't shoot until you see the green of their eyes." Holland and McRae led the way down the umbilical corridor, Vincent in the middle, with Durant and Booth bringing up the rear. Pizer watched them depart, feeling a little better for Holland's words, but still deeply disappointed. His gaze moved up, then down to stare through the transparent material of the tube. Around him, the floating city that was the Cygnus lay gleaming but still devoid of any sign of life. Silence and light. Well, that was an improvement over 18 months of silence and darkness. Pizer turned and hurried back inside the Palomino. As they neared the end of the corridor, Vincent moved slightly in front of McRae, taking a more prominent position near the forefront of the little expedition. The movement was not born of some mysterious form of mechanical bravery, though Vincent could have been counted on to supply that necessary intangible in whatever amount might be required. It was a bit of simple logic, one which noted that his metal body was less susceptible to laser fire than human flesh. Holland edged close to the end of the umbilical and peered cautiously into the craft. The tube opened onto a large, well-lit chamber. Lavish compared to the energy-conserving, dimmer illumination of the Palomino, the bright light made him blink despite his determination not to. Furniture 2 decades out of style filled the room. Lounges and chairs were scattered about, and free-form glass ports gave the occupants varying views of deep space. There were decorative plants, some real, some artificial, objets d'art, and tape viewers for casual reading placed throughout the area. A large curving desk faced the umbilical Holland now stepped clear of. Its top was bare save for several professional pieces of recording equipment. Holland recognized an already obsolete form of playback bank, an ident scanner 30% larger than current models, and several other devices, all designed to serve in some fashion to record information or provide it. The fact that this chamber was located on a small artificial world made the function of the reception room no less similar. No one sat behind the desk. That was the only expected item missing from the room, a receptionist. The chamber was devoid of official greeters, human or mechanical, but compensated with a feeling they all felt, something sensed but not visible. In a moment, Holland realized what it was. There was an aura of petrification about the entire chamber, from the farthest chair to the simple tape viewers. "Looks like this place hasn't been used in years," he muttered. "I get the feeling we may be the first official visitors since the Cygnus left Earth orbit." McRae and the others had fanned out into the spacious room. "Eerie," she said. "I don't want to sound melodramatic, but—" "Go ahead," Booth urged her. "The situation almost demands it." "I feel like not a few but 1,000 eyes are watching us." She was turning in a slow circle, eyeing the walls. "If so, where are they? Something on this ship turned on the lights, sent out an umbilical, and filled at least this section with breathable air." Something closed the door to the connector corridor with a plastic snap, sealing them off from the Palomino. Cracking noises came from places in the walls and ceiling. Holland's pistol was neatly vaporized. So were the others. Suddenly, Vincent was knocked backward, his own weapons similarly disabled by the flash of precision laser fire. "Vincent!" McRae noted that the others were all right, then ran to check on the metal body that was lurching unsteadily erect. "Down, but never for the full count, Dr. Kate." His external lights gradually returned to full strength, resumed pulsing in proper sequence. Something of a shock. Oh, I don't mean the effects of the beams or their presence. It was the speed and efficiency with which they engaged us, and the accuracy of their aim. Only our weapons were damaged. His optics began sweeping the room. "There is at least one major class mechanical or competent class human mind functioning on board the Cygnus." "Maybe," she said, looking around nervously now and wishing she possessed the robot's methods of perception. "It's the Cygnus's mind. Maybe that's what turned on the lights and sent out the connector for us." "I would consider that hypothesis, Dr. Kate, save for one obvious discrepancy. I don't follow you." "From our initial circling of the Cygnus to this moment," Vincent observed, "our presence here has been treated with uncertainty. Something or someone is improvising our greeting, acting one step at a time. Machines never act so erratically, only in pre-planned sequence. First we are ignored, then welcomed, then fired upon and disarmed, all without our greeter revealing himself. Very un-machine-like, so I am inclined to believe there is a non-mechanical mind functioning in control of, or in conjunction with any mechanical consciousness that might be inhabiting this vessel." "The non-mechanical mind? Have you learned enough to surmise whether it's human or not?" "Insufficient data thus far to proffer a reasoned opinion, Dr. Kate." Holland had his communicator out, was speaking into the tiny grid. "Charlie, this is Dan. Do you read?" "Loud and clear," came Pizer's response. "Something on the Cygnus together with the ship's bulk is screening out the majority of the noise around us. You sound like you're standing behind me." "I'm beginning to wish I were." Pizer's concern was immediate. "Trouble?" "Weapons destroyed by laser fire, but no injuries. The intent was clearly just to disarm us, not to injure. I'll be there and hold your position." "But what about the—" "No." Holland interrupted him more sharply this time. "I told you we're okay. I don't want to tempt whoever's monitoring us into incapacitating the Palomino by a further display of arms. Maybe they're just nervous. Such a reception area weapons system conforms with what we know about this ship. It may operate independently of other functions to prevent possible belligerents from coming aboard armed." "All right, but watch yourselves." Pizer clicked off. Booth leaned over to whisper something to Durant. "So much for the friendship theory. I'd say describing the condition of whoever's got eyes on us as nervous is understating it some." "Holland's right, though," the scientist argued. "They could already have killed us, if that was their intent, or simply denied us entry to the ship. They may want us aboard defenseless, but it's indisputable that they want us aboard." Yeah, well, I can't say I care for their taste in hors d'oeuvres, or for their manners. Booth was staring uncomfortably at the walls. The weapons, which had just destroyed their own pistols, were still hidden behind them. No doubt they were primed to fire at any time. He could imagine a half-dozen stubby, high-intensity generators aimed straight at his belly. A door slid aside at the far end of the reception room. They headed for it, striving to appear confident, succeeding only in looking tense. A high corridor stretched nearly a kilometer into the distance. It was impressively wide. Holland didn't try to conceal his reaction at the sight. He was awed once again. Intricate yet slim arches of metal supported the ceiling. The corridor was silent and bare, quite sterile-looking after the homey atmosphere of the reception chamber. This time he was expecting it when the door closed behind them, locking them in the corridor. There was still no reason to panic, though it did place one more barrier between them and the safety of the Palomino. A second, smaller door moved aside on their right. An internal transport vehicle waited there, humming like a stone dragonfly. "Looks like we're not expected to walk." McCrae moved to the air car. "Maybe someone suddenly remembered his manners." She might not have voiced the thought if she could have seen the ranks of unbeautiful but formidable-looking mechanicals that now filed into the sealed-off reception room. They emerged from behind wall panels, assembling with a silence broken only by the scrape of metal on metal. It did not take an education in cybernetics to see at a glance that the function of these machines was not to comfort, but to disassemble. Urgently, if need be. Without a word passing between them, verbal or electronic, they began to move in unison toward the now open umbilical leading to the Palomino. The air car sped the group silently along the cylindrical passageway. The walls were largely transparent, giving them a spectacular view of surrounding space. It was easy to imagine they were traveling outside the Cygnus, tunneling through the void, instead of speeding down a fully pressurized tube of plastic and metal. To one side was a vast swirling whirlpool of energy, the visual dying gasps of matter being drawn down into the collapsar. Elsewhere, the distant pricks of light that were other suns blended into the body of light that was the Cygnus. They reached the far end of the tube. Their vehicle slowed, came to a halt. A doorway ahead was closed, but opened for them when the air car reached a complete stop. Holland stepped out of the car and looked around. Behind them stretched the long, empty transport tube they had just traversed. The tube itself showed no other egress. Even if there had been a hatch, it would have opened directly into empty space. They could only continue on ahead, as someone clearly intended they should. "I'm getting tired of being bounced around like a ball in a box," Booth murmured irritably. "Calm down, Harry," Holland grinned. "Just think of the story this is leading up to." "I'm looking forward to it." Booth relaxed a little, smiled back at him. "Just impatient at the delays, that's all." "I don't think any of us will have much longer to wait," McCrae said, walking toward the now open door before them. It led into another empty, though much smaller, corridor. "Slow up, Kate." Holland hurried to join her, and she waited for the others to catch up. She was staring upward, toward a wide, illuminated port set high in the side of the command tower, whose base they had reached. "I know I shouldn't get my hopes up, but it's hard not to," she told Holland. He put a hand on her shoulder, pressed gently. It was a pitiful, inadequate gesture under the circumstances, considering what the Cygnus itself and now the nearby tower represented to her, but it was the best he could think of. He was better with a ship. "I know, Kate. We're all hoping along with you." She glanced at his face, then down at the floor, then back up at him. "It helps, some." The personnel corridor was short. Eventually, they reached a section which widened considerably. In the middle of the floor, a thick cylinder rose into the ceiling. Several doors were set into its sides. One was open and waiting, the green light above it shining steadily. Not much doubt where that goes. Booth spoke as he checked his recorders, making sure each of the disposable units was fully charged. I think we're finally going to meet our hosts. All of you remember one thing, Holland paused, blocking the elevator doorway. The Cygnus seems stable, but it's too close to that black hole to take any chances. We've already learned that the field holding it motionless here against the gravity pull is subject to variation. We still don't know if the field is artificially generated or if it's a natural phenomenon. If natural, it could shift radically or even fail at any time. We don't know how long the Cygnus has been stabilized here. It may have been defying the pull for a decade or more, or it could have become trapped here a day ago. My point is that we know practically nothing for certain about the forces in operation in this section of space. Not about those active around the black hole, or those keeping the Cygnus clear of it. Ignorance is the most dangerous form of instability, and I don't care if you're talking personality or physics. The sooner we repair the Palomino and leave here, the better for all of us. This last was spoken while he was staring directly at McCrae. She didn't argue with him, and her expression remained unchanged. Good, he thought. Emotionally hyper as she was still functioning realistically. He could still depend on her, if an emergency arose, to do that which was right, rather than that which might be attractive. And what if her father is aboard and alive? He already pushed that possibility aside. Take events as they come. Indeed, the sooner we are away, the better I like it. Vincent nudged his way into the elevator. Several of my robotic colleagues were victims of black holes. I personally was acquainted with 2. They were transferred to drone probes and trained like myself in human-machine asplink techniques. The theory was that they could then send messages back from beyond the return limits of the gravity wells of such objects as black holes. A grand experiment, the scientists thought. Sadly, it did not work. Ancient history, Vincent, said the reporter. Not to me, Mr. Booth. For one thing, the project designers had not considered the effects that dissolution of their metallic partners under great stress would have on the human end of the S-blinks. Several people collapsed mentally under the strain, such as their mechanical mind partners did not physically under pressure of a different kind. For another, nothing is ancient that is so close. The heat generated in such regions would melt me before the pressure rendered me dysfunctional. I have sufficient imagination to convince me it is a process I will do all in my power to avoid experiencing. The elevator door slid quietly shut behind them. They rose in silence. Casual conversation seemed suddenly indecent.